Well, John chapter 15, starting in verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I have commanded you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command of you, so that you will love one another. You understand how John 15 is put together. The beginning of John 15 is talking about a metaphor, and the metaphor is this beautiful picture of how we are connected to Jesus as branches to a vine. Well, Jesus moves from this metaphor, talking about a vineyard, to talking about another relationship that he has with us, and that is this idea of friendship. Now, just saying the term friendship here in 2018 may give some of us an element of anxiety, because the truth is many of us today have a lot of acquaintances, but we don't really have a lot of people that we would call a true friend. I found myself recently in discussions with pastors of churches, large churches, guys who are surrounded by people and people that love them and care for them, and yet one of the laments that I hear from them often is they don't have anybody that is a true friend. I've met with a couple people from my church recently, and even though they've got their spouse and they've got kids and they've got family and they've got people around them, they too lament the fact that they don't have a close friend. Sitting in a coffee shop with a guy, and we were just talking about where he's at in his life, and this big guy just with tears welling up in his eyes. I just asked him, I said, do you have any friends? And he said, I don't have any friends. So a common thing that we continue to hear over and over is that people are incredibly lonely. People are lonely. Now, lonely doesn't mean that you're alone. You can be lonely and be surrounded by lots of people. You can be married and be very, very lonely. You can have superficial friendships and be lonely. You can have 1,000 friends on your social media account and they all actually like your stuff, and you can be incredibly lonely. Loneliness, it's something that we know in America right now that's absolutely trending. In America, we meet fewer people, we gather less as groups, and when we do, those relationships tend to be less meaningful than what they used to be. According to a 2013 survey, 75% of people are not satisfied with their relationships, with their friendships. 63% are not even confident in their friendships. 2010, our survey found that 35% of adults older than 45 were chronically lonely, as opposed to 20% of a similar group only 10 years previous. In 1950, less than 10% of American households contained only one single person in that household. By 2016, nearly 27% of American households have only one single person in it. And we may not have friends, but we've got lots of pets, right? From 1992 to 1999, the amount of time spent caring for our pets went up 15%. I mean, we don't know our neighbor, but we really know our cat or our dog, right? We know them incredibly well. And if all you have is a cat, that's really, really sad. In 2018, Americans spent $751 million on Valentine's Day on their pet. Yeah, that's the sound of my mind being blown too, right? Ronald Dworkin pointed out in a 2010 paper for the Hoover Institution that in the late 40s, the United States was home to 2,500 clinical psychologists, 30,000 social workers, and fewer than 500 marriage and family therapists. That's a total of 33,000 people to handle the working load. Now, as of 2010, the country had 77,000 clinical psychologists, 192,000 clinical social workers, 400,000 non-clinical social workers, 50,000 marriage and family therapists, 105,000 mental health counselors, 220,000 substance abuse counselors, 17,000 nurse psychotherapists, which I have no idea what they do at all, 30,000 life coaches. Now, that number goes to 1,091,000 professionals to do the work of what 33,000 used to do back in the 1940s. The majority, the article goes on to say, of patients in therapy do not warrant even a psychiatric diagnosis. These hired people are helping us through what used to be called regular problems. We've outsourced the work of caring for regular problems from friends to professionals. Why? Because we don't have any friends. There's actually a company up in Portland called Cuddle Up to Me. All good things come out of PDX. You can go to Cuddle Up to Me, make your appointment for a strictly platonic cuddle session. You will pay for a hug, a long hug. Some of you are like, business idea, Eugene. We live in the most technologically connected age in the history of civilization. Yet rates of loneliness have doubled since the 80s. Today, over 40%, and that's really conservative, of adults in America report feeling lonely. Now, where does loneliness lead? The practical side of loneliness leads to a reduction of lifespan similar to that caused by smoking 15 packs of cigarettes a day. Not packs, cigarettes. And even greater than that associated with obesity. It's a chain smoker, they got a problem. They're not living long. On the harsh end, we saw this, and we continue to see this with famous people taking their lives. Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade. In light of those events, just this past month, trained counselors at more than 150 crisis centers in the United States saw a 65% uptick in suicidal calls this past month after those suicides. Suicide rates are up 28% from 1999. In 2016, 45,000 people took their own lives, making suicide one of the top 10 leading causes of death in America. Understanding that this is a major epidemic, in January of last year, Britain appointed its very first ministry of loneliness. This person is charged with tackling what Prime Minister Theresa May called the sad reality of modern day life. Now, it's not just a sad reality of modern life. Loneliness is a part of life, okay? So what does the Bible have to say about all this? Why is it this way? Why are we lonely? And today, I just want to answer 3 questions for you. The first one, why are we alone? What is the answer to our loneliness? And how does Jesus, and even better, the beauty of the gospel, meet us in the midst of our loneliness? Now, in order to answer this question, we need to start at the beginning. See, you, despite what people have told you over and over and over, are not a product of something that just kind of happened over millions and millions and millions of years. You just gotta come into existence over time and just develop over time. No, even in man's beginning, according to the Bible, it says we were fearfully and wonderfully made and created in the image of God. In your makeup, you were designed with a need for friendship. For you see, God exists eternally as Father and Son and Holy Spirit, and the three live in this beautiful dance, is what theologians call it, this beautiful friendship. Now, Jesus begins to hit on this here in John chapter 15, verse 9. Did you see what he said? He says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. He says, I'm loving you just as I have been loved by the Father. Then he goes on to say in verse 12, love one another as I have loved you. We desperately need that kind of love. And what is that love? That is the love of a friend. Because we were created in his image, when Jesus uses the word love here, he has friendship in mind. I think sometimes when we read love, we automatically go to Hollywood or Eros. There's just that passionate love that ends up in somebody else's bed. That's not the kind of love Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about this friendship love. We even see, coinciding with the word love in this chapter, the connection to friendship in this chapter. So when Jesus is talking about love, he's really talking about friendship. You could read that like this: as the Father and I have been eternally friends, so I befriend you. The beauty of Jesus is you never get unfriended. He friends you. And then he says this: abide in that friendship. Connecting friendship with this vineyard idea of John chapter 15. So what abiding is in the vine, abiding is just simply relationship with Jesus. It's staying a friend of Jesus because Jesus is a friend of you. Now, by saying this, Jesus reveals that there is something so important in the Trinity that it impacts everything else that we do. The Bible tells us before time, before there was anything, there was this friendship. Because the Father, the Son, and the Spirit have always existed, there was never not friendship. Friendship wasn't something that was created. There was never a time when friendship was not, because from all eternity, they were together as friends. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, knowing each other, loving each other, delighting in one another, planning, communicating with each other. Friendship in the Trinity then becomes this beautiful basis for every other relationship. After all, what happened when God created Adam? Adam was the first human being created. He was created perfect, placed in the Garden of Eden, in paradise, better known as Bend, Oregon. And right away, we are told God looked at him and said, after creating, the mountains and the sunsets and the islands and turquoise waters and just all of the beauty that is there, he was saying, it is good, it is good, it is good. Then he sticks a guy single, alone as a bachelor in the garden. He's like, that is not good. That's not a healthy spot for him to be. Why? Why was Adam lonely? We really need, this is a massive theological idea. This is before sin. Adam is lonely, and it's not first caused because of sin. Adam was not lonely because he was imperfect. Adam was lonely because God created him perfect, and in his perfection, he needed relationship. Adam was lonely because he was made in the image of God, like God. God had Trinity. He had to have someone then to love, Adam did. Someone to work with, someone to talk to, someone to share with. Do you know what this means? This means that even if you were in a perfect state, you're not, but if you were in a perfect state, it is not good enough for you to just go solo and just be all like, it's just me and Jesus. That's all I need. All I need is Jesus. No, you were built for friendships. You were built to have relationship. You're not created to be alone. That means life wouldn't be better if it was just like you and God and sitting on a rock somewhere. I know if you have a family, which you all do, sometimes that sounds really nice. If you have so-called friends that are not exactly awesome friends, sometimes that sounds really nice. I'm just gonna go be in the woods, me and Jesus. That's what I do, right? Just gonna go out there somewhere, be alone. No. God created us with an innate need for relationship, both relationship with him, which is what Adam had there in the beginning, but also with a relationship with each other. Loneliness originally was because of your created perfection, not because of sin. Loneliness was originally there, not because there's something wrong with you. Some of you are like, there must be something wrong with me. I'm so lonely. No, God did that. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because there's something right in you. You have that need. The reason you're lonely and you get lonely is because you're not a flower or a tree. Some of you, maybe you drive out towards like Burns. So that means you go past Bend. You go from like heaven to hell. And you keep going that direction. And you go out there and you see like a juniper tree just sitting out there. And you're like, oh, I bet that tree's lonely. That tree's not lonely. It doesn't get lonely out there. It doesn't need a hug. I know you're from Eugene. You might give it a hug. It doesn't need a hug. It's okay. It doesn't have positive energy that needs other energy. No, it's not lonely. It's not a person, okay? Just setting up the theology here. But because you're a human, built in the image of God, you're lonely. Because you've been created in his image with a desire, a need for friendship. Now, that's problem number one. That's in a state of perfection that you need relationship. But there's another problem as it pertains to loneliness. That's where Genesis chapter 3 hits. There is a reason loneliness persists even though you are surrounded now by people. We're not like Adam, who didn't have anyone, and then he gets Eve, and he's like, I guess we'll be better off as friends. And we're there, and we have great friendship because he's got Eve. No, you've got massive amounts of people all around you. Adam had no one. He got someone. We have lots of someones all around us. So why are we still lonely? Because this is where sin does enter in. We hit Genesis 3. Sin enters into the equation of human history. Adam and Eve sin against God, and in so doing, they separate. Because that's what sin does. It severs, it causes separation. They separated themselves from God, and there was a separation from each other. They hide from God and try to cover up their shame, and then Adam starts blaming his wife and God. It's the woman, right there, her fault, that you gave me. I mean, he blamed everybody that existed at that point in time, right? He just got to cover the whole block. That's a man for you right there, right? This is what sin does. It ruins relationship. We want friends, we want community, we want relationships, which is all good. It's how we are in fact built, but we have a hard time connecting with one another and having long-lasting friendships because of sin. Sin comes between people, sin separates people, sin causes people to run away, sin causes people to duck, to cover. Why? Because we don't really want to be known, because we are really afraid if we are really known, uncovered, naked, right, that nobody will want to be around us. So we have this fear that if we're really known, we won't be really loved. And yet we have this human need to be fully known and to also be fully loved. So sin comes between people. We take cover, it brings bitterness, it causes envy, it causes anger, it causes mistrust, it causes hurt. So we hide from one another. The man who divorces his wife does so because of sin. The son that abandons his family does so because of sin. The friend who doesn't follow through, which is all friends, right, does so because of sin. Our need for friendship is hindered by sin, which is why we isolate and are very alone. Now, there was a guy that knew a lot just about life. He had a lot of wisdom, was one of the wisest men that ever lived. His name was Solomon. And Solomon actually has a ton to say on this topic of friendship. And he's got a ton to say in the Proverbs. So if you ever want to just kind of look up what he has to say about friendship in the Proverbs. But he has an entire chapter dedicated in Ecclesiastes as to why we're just not very good friends, and yet we need to be really good friends. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, you can turn there if you want to. Ecclesiastes is a book where Solomon is searching out everything under the sun, trying to figure out why everything under the sun just is vanity. It's just like the wind. You try to reach out for it and grab it. You're not satisfied in your heart. And it's not until Solomon understood that there was a God over the sun that the stuff under the sun started to make sense. So that's just kind of a high-level theme of Ecclesiastes. But here Solomon, Ecclesiastes 4, is now going to hit on this topic of friendship. And he's going to slam it because he realizes we're not really good friends. What kills friendship? This is what he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. He says, here's the first killer of friendship. Again, I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun. And behold, there's tears of the oppressed. And they had no one to comfort them. No one to comfort. What is that? That's a friend. They have no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors, there was power. And there was no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. Tell us how you really feel. But better than both is he who has not yet been and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. First thing he says is, we are lonely as a people, as a culture, as a nation, as a world, because we oppress people. Instead of caring for people and cultivating relationships with people, we sin by oppressing others and killing relationships. We prefer power over people. Oppression can be defined as this: prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment of others. Oppression is when we degrade people by making them less human. Oppression is when we use people to get something from them instead of just loving them. Oppression is abusive behavior, physical, sexual, emotional, spiritual. All of that alienates people. We kill friendship with oppression through sexism and ageism and lookism and racism and sizeism, and every other ism is just another tribe that we can come under to feel like we're awesome and they're not, and we oppress them, and there's no one to comfort them. We kill friendships when our motivation is to use people, not love them. We do that by promoting ourselves or our product or our selfie, right? You're an Instagram wife, you've got an Instagram husband who's always behind the camera taking shots of you to sell your stuff, not because you're a friend, because you want to get something from people. It's marketing. Or we do this by promoting ourselves or our products or to gain something from them. That kills relationships. And oppression makes us very, very lonely. He says this, the next thing that makes us really lonely, look at verse 4. He says, then I saw that all toil and all skill and work, people's jobs, all what you're sweating for, comes from this: a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and striving after the wind. What does he say? Envy makes you lonely. Solomon just told us that the reason you work 60 hours a week and you're pushing so hard is because you want what they have. You're envious. He's saying that at the center of our hearts, we want to be desperately noticed. That's why we buy what we buy, we wear what we wear, we drive what we drive, because we envy and we want people to notice. It's why we post what we post. We just want to be known. Some of us are lonely because we don't like being around people and have things that we don't have. And that kills friendships. If they're wealthy and we're poor, that's hard for us. Or they're attractive and we're not, that's difficult for us. Or they're smart and we're not. They're married and we're not, right? The Bible says we are to rejoice when others rejoice and weep with those who weep. Now, that is a beautiful picture of what real friendship looks like. That's very simple. Weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice. That is easier said than done. It is easier to weep with others than it is to rejoice with them in their successes. You think about it. Someone loses a parent, a child, there's miscarry, there's divorce, there's bankruptcy that's declared, health issues. Like, you can swoop in as a friend and you're there with them. Spend time with them. You shed tears with them. You can bring comfort to them. You can cuddle up to them. You can do all of that, right? But a friend gets the raise you wanted at work, the house you wanted, the position you needed. How's your rejoicing? Friend has baby number 4, you just miscarried for the 5th time. How's rejoicing? Some of you, your friendships have taken a turn because either something good happened to you and someone became envious, or something good happened to a friend and you became envious, and now you're kind of alone. Take this into the church. Because of envy, people say, there's no friendship here because they're envious. They attended a group once or a gathering a few times and they see other relationships. They want that, but they don't have that, right? Maybe they notice the ministry spots of others, or they see the dress of others, or intelligence of others, or beauty of others, and it's just hard to handle in big gatherings. So we make excuses. They're shallow. They didn't reach out to us. The truth is they do. You're separated and lonely because there's an element of enviness that's in the midst of your heart. You can't have friendship if life is always a fight to see who's best. Envy suppresses our ability to have real relationship. Third, verse 5. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Insert Walking Dead comment. What does that mean? It means we're lazy. The fool folds his hands. I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to see who comes and talks to me, see who hangs out with me. And then there's just this devouring in their own heart, in their own soul. There's this Eeyore for you Winnie the Pooh fans. If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. That just kind of takes over in your heart. Friendship, listen. Friendship takes work. It is a lot of work to be a friend, because the truth is there's just not that many good friends, right? Including you, including me. It takes a lot of work. And if you're not willing to work, to invest, to put yourself out there with others, you will not have relationship. You'll be left alone and eventually eat your own flesh, devour yourself. See, friendship is not just an idea that we can sit back and idealistically believe in. We should have community. Yeah, we got to find our tribe. We got to find our people. We got to find our friend. Yeah, that's a great idea. No, it takes work. You can't just believe in it. Friendship is something that you have to invest in. You can't just say, well, you know what, I'm an introvert, right? It's not my personality type. Took a test. You may be an introvert and you may not be outgoing. That does not give you an excuse to be a lazy friend. Lazy friends want the relationship to come to them. What's the world doing to provide the friendship with me? What's the church doing to make friends with me? What's my social group doing to invite me in? I'm always left out. What are they doing for me? What are you doing to be a friend to others? Friendships work, but it is a labor out of love. You develop friends through places that you're giving time to. You develop friendship through places that you're giving energy out to. If you're lazy, nothing happens. Maybe you moved here years ago. You've kind of been in the Eugene area for a while and you kind of miss the friendships that you had when you were like back in college or you were back in high school, or you go way back, you're like 6th grade, that was the time of idealistic friends. I mean, that's like Stranger Things kind of stuff. That's awesome friendship kind of things. Like, I love that kind of stuff. That's where my real friends were. That's because you had all the time in the world to just make friends. Now you have things like real life, and you got to work. You've got to do things to provide. You have children, which basically suck every moment of energy out of you, so you have nothing left to give to anyone else, right? So what does that mean? That just means it's going to take a lot more time if you're really interested in developing relationships and friendships. Don't blame people. Don't blame the church. It takes a lot of time to develop friends, and we can't just sit around and say, where are my friends, fold my hands, and eat my own flesh. I like that verse. Verse 6, next reason, better is a handful of quietness. Every mother with a 2-year-old just stopped there and went, that sounds fantastic. Then 2 hands full of toil and striving after wind. Again, I saw vanity under the sun, one person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to his work, to his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, why am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and unhappy business. What does he say? He says, we are workaholics. That's what he says there. We work way too much. The first verse, he says, it would be better to be quiet, to take a break, to rest, than to just keep pushing on through. If you never take a break from your work, you can never develop any kind of meaningful friendship or relationship. Then he gives a picture of someone. He gives a picture of this person that has no one. He has lots of work. He's toiled a lot. He's done a lot of things. And he has no one now, though, to enjoy it with. This is a person that's worked all of their life and they've never developed any kind of friendship. So they have all this stuff, but they have no one to share it with. Listen, your work and your job can kill your ability to have one of the things that you need most in life, and that is friendship and relationship. Some of you work hard, which is awesome. You work hard for you work hard for your relationships, great. But if all you do is work for them, you may lose them. If all you do is push through, you may lose them. This guy, he's like, Solomon's talking about this particular person. I look around, I envy what everybody else has, so I need to work so that I then can be the envy of others. So I need money. Once he had money, now he needs more money. But as he spends his years working away, eventually he's like, what's the point? Why did I do all of this? I got no one around me. It's sad. Either you lose what family or friends you had in your desire for more, or you never had any to begin with. This guy never had any friendships, never had any hobbies, never developed anything but the business. Now he's at the end of his life spending all of his money on therapists and going to Portland to get cuddled up. That's this guy. The truly wealthy person has time and friendship to share what he has with. Works hard, shares it. Works hard, has people to do life with. Finally, Solomon hits this final reason why and how our sin kind of divides us in our relationships. Look at verse 13. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. What do friends do? They give advice. For he went from prison, so he came from the small town, small area, went from prison, the heaps, to the throne, though in his own kingdom he had been poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand then in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all of whom he led. Yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is a vanity and striving after the sun. What is he saying here? He's saying, here's a king. This king has tons of authority, lots of wisdom. He's arrived. Now he has no need for a counselor in his life. He doesn't need someone younger than him speaking into his life. He doesn't need anybody over him. He is the final authority. He's wiser than everyone else. He's smarter than everyone else, so he doesn't need anyone, and he puts himself into a place of isolation, and now this king is lonely. Maybe some of you are there. You don't listen to people. You don't have anybody, any accountability. Nobody speaks truth into your life. You're the king. If all you do is control others and give direction to others, but never listen to others, you cannot have real friendship. Solomon says, life under the sun is hard, but to be alone and under the sun is miserable, like owning cats. It's vanity. It's meaningless. You want to email me? It's Ian@Ekklesia. So what is the answer? He says in verse 9, here's the answer. You ready? So we've painted this problem. Okay? We're lonely. We're lonely because we were created that way. We're lonely because we cause that element of loneliness in our lives, right? So we do those things. So what's the answer? Listen to what Solomon says. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. He says two are better than one. What he's saying is you're not built to be alone. You're built for friendship. built for relationship. This is why Jesus says in John 15:12, love one another as I have loved you, because it's going to be difficult to make it on your own. As John 15 continues, Jesus actually tells them, guess what? This is why you need to love each other, because there is a world out there full of systems. And their systems of how they do things are a lot different than your systems. And because you don't fit their system, because you have a higher authority than the boss, you have a higher authority than the professor, you have a higher authority than even the marital relationship, the higher authority is me, it's a different system. Guess what? Because the world hated me, this is what you get for being on my team. They're gonna hate you too. Wanna join? They're gonna hate you, and guess what? They're gonna kill you. He tells them that. Where do I sign up? That sounds like a great one, right? Because it's going to be difficult, you can't make it on your own, love one another. Peter, John, be friends. Thomas, be a friend. Which is one more reason why we need friends. When you try to do this life on your own, here's what Ecclesiastes 4 sums up as what you get. There's no comfort. You're better off dead. You're better off not having ever even been born. You eat your own flesh. You work for nothing. No one cares about you. Sounds like a song from Nirvana from the 90s. I mean, it's just bad, right? If that's not incentive enough as to why we need friendship, he says, look, here's the positive side of friendship. You get a really good reward. Think about how much more you get done when you have someone to help you. When you have friends, you get to help serve one another. You get to solve people's problems. You get to use what gifts you have to help one another. You get to use what God gives you to serve others. So two are better than one. There's just a reward from it. The second thing he says that's positive here is they help you up. He says you're going to fall, verse 10. He says, for if they fall, one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. You're going to fall. Maybe literally you're going to fall. You're going to end up in the hospital. You're going to have bills. You're going to need meals. Who's going to be there to comfort you? You need a friend in that moment. Real friends help. If you got into an accident today, who's going to take care of you? Who's going to drive you there? Who's going to take you to appointments? Who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to drive you to future appointments? Solomon's like, life is really, really hard here. The Bible doesn't paint this like picture that life is rosy. No, life is really, really hard here. There are going to be difficult seasons we go through. You're better off with a friend. Not only fall physically, you will fall into sin. We will. That is a promise. You're going to sin. You're going to sin against God. You're going to sin against each other. If you don't have a friend, someone who can be honest with you to where you don't like defriend them for 30 days, so someone that you can just like block out, if you don't have a friend that can be honest with you, who's going to help you up? You're going to persist in those things. Or maybe you're going to end up totally destroyed by the guilt or the shame because there's an enemy that comes in and he condemns you. We need our friends to remind us of who we are in Christ. We need our friends to remind us that the work of Jesus covered those things. We need friends to remind us that we've been reconciled to God through the redemption of our true and better friend in Jesus. We need friends to help us when we fall. That's what friends do. I'm just going to ask you this, like, as I paint that picture, who comes to mind? I don't know, I'm alone. Who can tell you the hard things and you don't just write them off because they really are a friend that you trust? Who's going to speak truth and grace into your life? Who points you to redemption? Who encourages you to reconcile when you fall? You need people to help you up. The next thing that he says that's positive there, verse 11, he declares this, again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? Specifically, the idea here is when you're camping, there's no fire. If it gets cold, who's going to warm you up? It's like me. I never knew that when I got married that every single night I was going to be touched by Mr. Freeze, which is like my wife's feet, right? She's like, I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm just warming up. I'm like, those things are cold, right? You should have to get a permit for that. I mean, that's terrible, right? Cold feet, brutal. You need a friend for warmth. This isn't necessarily, though, a marriage verse, although lots of people like to use this verse at marriage time or at weddings or whatever, but we need to be touched and warmed. We need human contact, which is why PDX just has that great idea up there. You deeply need human touch and contact, warmth. It is a gift from God to have a friend who will give you a hug. Not just a bump, but a hug, right? You need contact because we're cold. We need to embrace and hug and cuddle. And you can do much more if you have a friend with benefits in your wife. Verse 12, you're going to face battles. And though a man might prevail against one another, one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not easily broken. What does he say here? You're going to face battles. No one wants to go to war alone. We want to link arms. We need people to link shields with. That's the idea of three, because you got a friend on this side and on this side, and you're going into battle with them. Solomon says it's much better to have a friend in a fight. The Bible tells us, in general, we're in a war. There's an enemy who hates you. He wants you depleted. He wants you lost. He wants you lonely. You need a friend to link shields with to deal with the attacks of the enemy. There's going to be doubt. There's going to be times when your faith is just really, really weak. Maybe you're just even questioning the whole God thing in general. You need a friend to link arms with. A friend, because as we will see, as Jesus said in John 18, the world hates us. The point is this: we need each other. And with true friendship, you can expect things like tears and comfort, falling and helping, failure, forgiveness, cold, Mr. Freeze, and warmth. Giving, receiving, that's real friendship. And we need these very real friends. Having said that, here's where we get ready to close. Having said that, even greater than our need for one another, God knew that Adam needed Eve, right? We need God as a friend. We need to know that God is, in fact, a friend. This is where Jesus and the gospel meet our deepest need for friendship. Because Solomon paints this picture of our need for friendship, but the truth is we're not very good friends. The fact that we are lonely with thousands of people around us tells us as a culture, as a people, as a world, that there is still something missing. You see, friendships with other human beings are indispensable. Nothing can replace them. And we get to have those even into eternity. It's beautiful. Adam needed Eve even when he had a relationship with God. And yet at the same time, we have to understand that what Jesus is saying very clearly here is the actual need for a friend is first found in him who is the true and better friend. And because Jesus is the best friend, no human friend, hear me on this, no human friend will ever be able to deliver the satisfaction and perfection of friendship that only is found in Jesus. You're going to look for it in friends. You'll look for it in spouses. You'll look for it in relationships. But unless you see Jesus as the full answer to the true and better friend, it's going to be difficult because you're going to keep searching for that friend who all those friendships simply point to him. No human being can actually fulfill those needs because all human beings like you and me are imperfect friends. But our imperfect friends point us to our greatest need for the true and better friend, Jesus. This means you're going to spend a lot of life being very bitter and very upset with your very human friends in your heart because you're searching for the true and better friend. You're going to search for the one that always lets you in. You're looking for someone that's going to tell you secrets. You're looking for someone that's never going to let you down. But until you find Jesus, your relationships with other friendships are never going to be satisfactory. We need Jesus to be able to understand what it means to even be a friend. Because when we look at him here, what does he tell us? He's the friend in John 15 that always lets you in. What do you mean? He says, you're not just my servants, because servants don't really know the heart of the one they serve. They don't really know the mind of the one who serves. He's saying, I let you in. Jesus was telling his boys the greatest mysterion, the greatest mystery of the world, which was him, God in the flesh, come to earth to die for them. He was telling them their future at the end of John 15, what was going to happen to them. They're going to get kicked out of synagogues. This is what they should expect for following him. A true friend invites you into secrets. Jesus invites us in to the greatest secret, the beauty of relationship with him. He doesn't just tell you what to do, but he also walks with you. What does that mean? It's the difference of someone who gives you directions on where to go versus someone that gets in the car with you and takes you. Like today, we're gonna go up to Seattle and go to a really good restaurant right there, like El Gaucho or something like that. We're gonna go up there, get some steak. Man, it's gonna be awesome. We're gonna go up and we're on the way, but we don't really know how to get there because we left our iPhone at home. So we're on the way and we don't really know directions anymore because we rely on our iPhone for all of that. And so you're on the way, you get to a gas station up there and you ask someone, you're like, hey, how do I get here? A non-friend would just say, okay, here's a map. I'll draw you some things. Go follow it and I hope that you make it there. A friend would be a guy who's a really happy gas attendant. He jumps in the car with you and he says, hey, let's get together. I will show you what to do. We'll have conversation along the way. And guess what? I'll even buy you the steak. That's awesome. Let's do that. That is a friend. Jesus is that kind of friend. Jesus doesn't give you the map on where you're going. He's not saying, this is all the things that you need to do, and if you check all the boxes, you're gonna make it to heaven. Instead, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. I'm jumping in the car with you. I'm gonna die, but I'm gonna give you my spirit as a helper, and I'm gonna go along with you. And guess what? It's not even about your work, it's about mine. I'm paying the bill, and I'm gonna get you there. That's Jesus. He's the true and better friend. He also never lets you down. How do I know he never lets me down? Because of verse 13. Greater love has no one than this, than he would lay down his life for his friends. And he calls you a friend. He sacrificed for you. Do you know what Jesus did? On the cross, Jesus was unfriended, taking on God's wrath so that you could be friended, receiving God's love. That's the gospel. It's not what you do, it's what he did. And because of what he did, you get to be a friend of God. You were the enemy of God. Jesus became the enemy of God so that you could be friends with God. And unless you see that forgiveness and reconciliation, that friendship has been given by God first, then there is no reason to live for anything other than yourself. Jesus extended friendship. He's the truest of friends. He speaks the truth. He protects, provides, he comforts, he cares. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. He gave up independence. He gave up convenience. He left heaven. He gave up his life for your sake and mine, experiencing the ultimate loneliness of the cross in the process. Some of you are saying, I am lonely. Does God understand what it's like to be lonely? In that moment on the cross, when all had forsaken him, he experienced the greatest loneliness of history when our sins were placed upon him. Relationship with the Father was broken so that relationship with you could be repaired. God did that for you. He understands loneliness. He knows what it's like to be in a garden about ready to go to the cross, biggest moment of his life, asking a few friends to come with him and pray. And guess what they did? They fell asleep. Awesome friends. He knows what that's like. As our great high priest, he's experienced what you have experienced in every single point. He is the better friend. We are not awesome friends to God and to others. We've sinned against him, we've abandoned him, but he, as the true and better friend, has pursued us, mankind, from the garden to the cross, and he has called us friend. And you know what the thing is with Jesus? You can't earn his friendship. The only way to be a friend of Jesus is to accept that he offered it to you. Verse 16 says, he chose you to be his friend, not because you're awesome. You're like, of course he picked me to be on the team. I've got so many great things. No, it's because he's awesome. He has met the need of loneliness that resides in your heart, and if you receive his love, then you have the capacity to love others. He's the third cord that binds our friendships and gives us purpose in them. He allows us to deal grace rather than guilt. He allows us to forgive rather than oppress. He allows us to rejoice rather than envy. He allows you and I to have purpose in our work and to share what we have been given because he has shared himself with us. If Jesus isn't central as a friend, we're not reconciled to God. And real reconciliation and relationship with others is going to be very, very difficult because there's no reason to do it. You are not called to live alone. If you're born again, you've been brought into a family. You're a friend of Jesus. As a friend, you have reward with him. As a friend, he picks you up when you fall. As a friend, he warms you when you're cold. He fights for you. He gives you counsel. He gives you direction. You don't have to be lonely. The answer to lonely is the gospel, and the truth of the gospel is Jesus, who is our true and better friend. You are built to be connected to the vine, and that is happening through friendship. God has offered his to you, and he pursues you and I as the true and better friend. Let's pray.